Hi, this is a quick overview, should we say, of citation and referencing as part of study skills at level 7 in the Masters for Safety and Risk Management. I would say that any university that you link with and work with have their own approach to referencing and citation. So please always check with the university first of all. And I know at Harriet Watts, there's a lot of support for students in terms of how they do it. So this session aims are to appreciate how using the work of others to support your writing can enhance a piece of work, to avoid plagiarism by quoting and paraphrasing correctly. And in Harriet Watts, they use, as most universities do, the Harvard referencing system. So I want to show you how to do that and make sure you follow the basic guidance around that. So referencing is the citing of sources you have utilized to support your essay, your research, your conference or article. Whenever another source contributes to your work, you must give the original author the appropriate credit in order to avoid plagiarism, even when you've completely reworded the information. At universities, they have software that can use algorithms to identify whether plagiarism is in place or not. So if you don't follow the rules of referencing, the system, whether it's Turnitin or others, they will look at the information that's been presented and then say, from a comparative point of view, how much they believe that has used other sources, and will then check as to whether it's adequate or not. It will then give advice to the tutor to then decide whether they should investigate further. And if it's academic misconduct because of plagiarism, then it could be serious consequences. So it's always worth making sure you put reference in, because it is only fair to give credit to other people. The second side of it is, for me, when any academic piece of work is produced, it really does add credibility to any argument, discussion, or debate that's being put forward by the students. So it's important that you use referencing to show off, to say, look at the research I've done. I've not just considered the documents expected, but I've gone much further or farther afield to get to a state of, I know what I'm talking about. So rather than it being Graham Kersley's opinion or any student's opinion, it's actually bringing in the specialisms of others to then say, I'm accurate in what I'm saying. So it's worth presenting it that way. So you're further proving that your writing is informed by appropriate academic reading with that enhanced research that you've done. And it shows your authenticity as well when you have been supportive of others. Now, in how to avoid plagiarism, there's lots of things to consider. So start to pull a plan together on what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Keep the track as you're doing your work and your research, and making sure you've got adequate notes on where you found it. There's nothing worse than saying, oh, where did I get that piece from? Oh, can't remember where it is. Whereas if you always have a book at the side for putting your notes in, and you always have this list of referencing at your side, it becomes quite automatic, as while you're doing your research, you put it in there. I would also stretch it to say, write down the page in the document, because even in something as small as this book, which is about 50 pages long, if I don't look at the exact page and make a note of it, page 32, I'm taking a quote from page 32. When I come back to it later, I'm having to go through every page of the book until I find, it's page 32. So try and avoid that by planning and resourcing it accordingly. Managed time is always useful, because before you know it, you could be reading and reading and reading, and you've not actually put anything down that's a useful supporting research to what you're trying to prove. So do that. Also, a big thing with academics is they don't like it if you've forgotten to proofread your document. Now that might need someone else who's good at these things to identify it on your behalf. But with Word nowadays, there is a lot of little helpers out there to show and check. So use Microsoft Word to your advantage. And if it says it's a spelling mistake, then check why is it a spelling mistake. Are you in a UK version of that Word document, or are you in an international version of it? So double check that. Also make sure that where it shows grammar might be slightly wrong. Read it through again and then say, you know, it's showing that little blue line underneath, it's a squiggly line. Have you used the right words here, and do I need to double check or reword it? Paraphrasing, you know, when you decide to take some of the information out and restructure it, then again, make sure you have referencing considerations in there. Whenever you paraphrase, every quote, it should have a corresponding reference in the text. So think about your list and also put the name and the date against when you put it into the main body. Save all your research and all your citations in a safe place, easy to access. So when it comes back to remembering what you have to do, it's all there for you. And please, for purposes of Harriet Watt's work, follow the Harvard-style citation referencing system. The in-text citations and full references as a specific way of looking at things. So in-text citation, if you're going to insert into your main body or your main text of your work, think about the word count, because it does add to your word count. So perhaps you might put it down, but if you're going to do every word that you're being quoted there for accuracy purposes, so be it, but it's going to add to your word count. So an in-text citation gives the author and the publication date at the side of it, but the list at the back gives you a lot more detail. So I've given an example there of when I've written something that I've put into the main body, at the side of it, I would put in brackets, Heinrich 1941. Now, there are variations on this, but nevertheless, so long as I have the author's name and in brackets the date, then that's acceptable. So make sure that you do that. And similarly, when it goes to the reference list at the end, for full referencing purposes, you're giving an alphabetical order in the reference list. That is typical Harvard style. So it may mean that you've got to jumble things around to make sure that the author's name typically at the beginning, so Heinrich, in this case with a H, will probably be midway down your list. So make sure that the first word is always in the alphabetical order. And there you can see in the example there, so in the main body I've got Heinrich 1941, but in my list at the end I've got Heinrich HW 1941, Industrial Action Prevention, and so on, all the way through to the second edition. So make sure you've got it in. Another thing in terms of titling the document you're referring to, I prefer, like in this case, Industrial Accident Prevention. I prefer it to be in a different font, typically Times Roman is my preferred, and then also in italics. So that stands out as being the title of the book or reference source. So in line with Harvard style, the in-text citations are the perfect way to seamlessly integrate these sources into your work, allowing you to strengthen the connection between your ideas, sources of material that you found with ease. And that's going back to what I was saying earlier about adding credibility and authenticity to your work. It's worth noting that those in-text citations must be included in your assignment's final word count. Don't forget that, please. Quite often people ask me that question, but it is part of it if it's considered the in-text citation approach. When adopting the Harvard style referencing in your work, you're inserting a quote, statement, statistics, or any other kind of source. Then again, it's got to be done in a particular way. So provide the author's name and the date in the parenthesis, in the main body, and right after you've put the information in. Parenthesis, just explain the extra bit, you know, it's adding extra information to a sentence using brackets, dashes, or commas. So when we say the parenthesis in the main body of your research, then it's done in a particular way to accept that it shows that it was and is. So in this case, the example I've used there, it's got Lutz and Hewitt, 2004. References and bibliographies. There's a difference between the two. So your bibliographies can quite often be extra reading. You might not be citing that within your main body, but it's going to influence your research. So over and above what you've put as your direct quotes in your Harvard style, you might also have a bibliography list where you've looked at that and you're showing off again the extent of your research that you've done, but you've decided on this occasion not to use their work in or cite their work within it. So again, as part of your referencing list that you're pulling together in your planning, make sure you also consider the bibliography as well. It's not too difficult, and therefore it should be in place to provide that consistency. So the information you need: the author, the year, the title, the publisher, the place of publication, and the page number. So that's the extent of it, and typically it follows that flow in terms of producing the information in line with the reference. There are a variety of different types of referencing. So the full quote, the direct quote, paraphrasing it as well, so you've shortened it down slightly. Here I've used the example inside the quote marks: Elvis had strong family values, he loved his mother dearly. So that's the quote that I'm going to use, the direct quote. And then to follow it and support it, I need that information that I've just talked about. Just behind the quote itself, I would put Elvis, and then I would put in brackets 2004. So I know that I'm using, that's in the main body. But at the end, in the reference list, all of that information needs to be produced. If I'm quoting directly from a source, then I need to again consider the author and the year of publication and the page reference from the book or the source. So remember to quote in quote marks. Some people do underlining, but it's much preferred to do quote marks. And also useful when the words of the author are perfect or exactly what you want. So example here is Elvis is alive and kicking. That's inside the quote marks. And then again, you've got the name of the person, the author. You've then got the year in which that was published. And then you've got the page number specifically to where it relates to. So that's how we mean by quoting directly from the source. You can also have summary quotes. So here you have the year of the publication and the page number in brackets at the end. It's useful when some of the author's words are perfect, but maybe slightly too detailed. Sometimes people choose to reduce it by putting ... So you put maybe brackets in place and you'll start at the beginning of the quote, and then you'll miss out the main section to save on word count. And at the end, you'd show the finishing few words of the quote. And that way it keeps your word count down. It covers it. If I'm reading it and I want to go and look at it in more detail, then I can go directly to where you've quoted and told me of it. But this is a summary. And what tends to happen is rather than doing that approach of put it inside quoted marks, what you'll do is reword it to suit your research. And when you've summarized it in that way, so long as you put the author's name in and the date, then it is supported within the main body. But again, put it in at the end in the list as well. So here what we're saying when we're summarizing it is we're showing that that person, the author in this case, Smith, has a belief, has an understanding, has an interpretation of. So you'll take out of context the little bit that you want. Here, Smith believes Elvis to be, and then in brackets, alive and kicking. Yeah, so the belief is there, and the context is put in place in terms of reference to Elvis, but you're only taking a small part, summarizing it out, and that keeps it down, but it's useful for you in terms of when you want it and how it looks. Paraphrasing, quite similar. Use the name of the author and the year of publication. You're putting the quote into your own words, so you're rewording it, paraphrasing. It's useful when authors have discussed a topic, but they haven't always reached a conclusion or the conclusion you want to support it. So you can take the bits out that you find useful, paraphrase them, and then put it in with your own words, but nevertheless give credit where it's due, and then make sure it's supported. So here it's argued rather than being a belief as such from Smith. So it's argued by Smith, and maybe you have other authors that you put in there as well. So it's argued by several people that Elvis is not dead and is in fact alive and well in there. But here there's no quote marks, and it's just you paraphrasing that and giving credit to Smith in this case, the author, to say what's happened. When you've got multiple authors, there's a couple of variations. So if it's 3 or less, so 2 or 3 rather than singular, you'll show all 3 names, surnames, and then again you put the date at the side of it, and then put your quote, your citation after that. Elvis is dead beyond all doubt. When there's more than 4, we tend to just use the term et al. And et al, I'll show you on the next slide, means the extra bit. So Richardson et al. Suggests that Elvis was never really here at all. So that's the way it appears in the main context. And again, you might spell out each and every author at the end in your reference list. Or if there's too many, just stick to Richardson et al. But again, so that myself as an academic, I can research it if need be, and genuinely check that it is your words and it relates to what's been summarized, should we say, in the main list. So et al. And means and others in Latin. So rather than having all the authors being listed, you can go to that in your reference list later, unless there are more than 4 authors, where you can leave it as a short list, so long as I can find it somewhere. So there's the example, Bond, et al. 89, title name of the book in this case, the page is linked, and so on and so forth. So that's how they should look as examples in the reference listing. And hopefully you can see there, in line with Harvard, you can see how we're going alphabetically: B for Bond, C for Carnival, D for department. Okay, so keep it in that kind of structure, and here F, the last one, for test. So it is quite simple. It just means you have to follow the rules. So author, year, typically shown in the main text, and then in the list, there's more detail that comes with it. So there's an example with our Elvis quote again. In my example, as I've used previously in another one of the sessions, I've looked at the book, A Definitive Guide to Behavioural Safety by Tim Marsh. So it would appear in the list like this. Marsh, Tim, 2017, A Definitive Guide to Behavioural Safety. You'll see there, put it in a different font and italics, first edition, Routledge, pages 16 to 18. Okay, so try and keep to that simple method that Harvard have put together, and then continue to follow that throughout that theme. And as you can see, the author and year is always at the beginning. So if all else fails, if I can track it down to that, I can see you've done an attempt in the right way. This is the journal article reference. So there are slight differences because it's the journal title and then the volume in terms of the issue and the parts, and maybe there's pages involved there. So it's only slightly different because of how can you find it and what does it look like as a reference. Online sources, well, it usually discusses or outlines the date that you accessed. Yeah, so in the it might be slightly different to when it was put online, but the date that you accessed that document, that video, or whatever it is that you put in place. That similar rules: the author, the editor, the year, the title, sometimes including the www reference for the URL in there. But again, you can see a logical progression in terms of what's put together. Now, the in references is to do with bits that are put together to try and help you when you're citing it within the text. So in your reference list, include the details of the main text. So let me show you by example. You can see that there was an original author, and the original author is Hartley P. Woods, but you've taken it from somewhere else. So that's what we're meaning by the in reference. Maybe it's not the original, the first author, and it shows some kind of tracking. But nevertheless, check your reference and make sure that you've put it as the first or the second person in line there. So Hartley was the original, Hartley, Woods and Pill were the original. However, it was Sieber that's put it in the research that you've read through slightly differently as such. Legal references come across ever so slightly different. So the abbreviation of the law, the year of the case, the volume number, and the number of the page where it appeared as well. So in this example, if you look at the case details there, volume 1, weekly law reports in 1989, and it was on that page. But the key point is try to be consistent. Yeah, if you're going to choose to use italics and quote marks, then stick to it. If you're going to use the underline method, then stick to it. But make it, don't do both, because that can be confusing. Yeah, stick to one or the other and be consistent. Make sure your list of references is the alphabetical approach. Try to keep it Harvard style. Keep a separate reference and bibliography list, so it's easier for to produce later on. And collect details as you go along to avoid backtracking and wasting time. So the link was to plagiarism, as I was saying at the beginning. Presenting someone else's work as your own is classed as plagiarism. If you don't reference the work of others, you are plagiarizing, and it can be accidental, bad or poor scholarly activity that leads to that. But nevertheless, I have done quite a few investigations on scholarly misconduct, and I don't like doing that. It takes hours and hours to do that, and if the outcome from the investigative team is so 3 or 4 people are involved in that, and I've spent a few hours and they spend a few hours trying to look into what went wrong there, and it turns out to be just badly referenced, all those people's times have been put in it unnecessarily. So again, go back to those points before, be consistent, follow the rules, and avoid unnecessary investigations. Some of the things to consider: do my quotes have speech marks and author names, the year and page reference? You might not always have to have the page reference, but write it down where you can, and then think about it in the end list. Have I identified the ideas of others within the text? This is about plagiarism. If you have used others, then make sure you give them the credit, put the author's name and the year in. Is my reference list complete with all the authors of all the work that I've produced there, the years, the titles and publishers? Have I included a bibliography list if it's needed to show off my background reading? Okay, so think about it and make sure you, again, follow the rules. There's loads out there. I've put the Open Universities because I've always been a fan of their study skills, but there are other documents, handbooks you can purchase if you wish on how to do this best. But as you can see there, just Google Open University. Once you're on Open University, go into referencing. There's a quick guide to Harvard referencing there, and that should pop up. So hopefully you've got a better understanding now of what we're looking for, and so that when it does come to doing the academic work, you can make sure that you do it in line with the university's requirements. So hopefully you've got an understanding of how we use that to write and enhance and support the quality of your work, how this will avoid plagiarism, and obviously the importance of following the Harvard referencing style to make it easy to follow and understand. Okay, so thank you for the time on watching this, and look forward to speaking to you again on the next subjects. Take care.